Hello and welcome. My name's Dominic Harvey, and I'm delighted to welcome you to CWJobs Employer Brand webinar. Today, we will explore the importance of employer brand and why it's a vital tool in attracting and retaining top tech talent in what is, as we know, very much a candidate-led market. In order to do that, I will have the very capable Steve Ward, who is the UK and Ireland Director from Universum. And he'll be giving us insights from Universum's latest talent research. And then we'll go into a panel discussion with Nimmi Patel, who is Policy Manager at techUK for Skills, Talent and Diversity, and also Milimo Banji, who is CEO and founder of TapIn. I'll let them explain their roles in a little bit more depth post-video. But first, let's pass over to Steve Ward, who can talk us through Universum's findings.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Steve Ward from Universum, and you'll probably seen some of Universum's contributions to CWJobs webinars before. And today we're going to focus on the subject of employer branding in the tech sector in 2022. And we're going to reflect on some of the research that we do each year, mostly looking at some of the stuff that came out from the latter part of 2021 that's helping guide our thoughts in 2022. But thank you all for having me, and thank you for CWJobs for having me as a guest upon this. Just as a quick intro to who Universum are, we're the world's leading data-driven and insights-led employer branding agency. What does that mean? We take enormous amounts of insights from across the globe, and in the case, obviously, of people on this call across the UK and Ireland, in order to understand talent. What does talent need? What are the drivers and motivators for joining a company? And what kind of companies are attractive to talent within each sector? And one of those sectors, of course, is the tech sector. And we use those insights as the fuel and guidance into EVP and employer brand strategic work, both from building the core strategy into how we then produce content and communications into the marketplace. As you'll see there, we're part of the larger Stepstone Group and Total Jobs Group with CWJobs. So again, part of a large network of great recruitment service providers. And across the bottom there, you'll see a number of our UK customers that we do an enormous amount of work with on insights and employer brand. So what are we going to cover today? I'm going to look at some of the big trends right now and kind of get underneath the skin of them as to the why are those trends happening. I also therefore will have also a little bit of a look and join that together with the evolving trends in tech talent in the UK in the latest research. That's really fascinating. So look forward to see some really interesting trends that we really need to be aware of if we're thinking about our recruitment communication. And then I'm going to tell a story about one of our customers, a fintech company, and how they are trying to get their employer brand just right as well at the moment. So we'll walk through how that's happening, because hopefully that might be good inspiration for everyone to be able to understand how you can impact this in your own organizations. So let's look at one big subject very, very quickly. I mean, we all know the Great Resignation is right there in front of us, and over the last coming few months, and affecting us right here, right now, particularly as we join a new year. The challenge of retention and the availability of talent is a real challenge for us all. We saw this happen in Universum's research. We asked a question about whether you're looking to move in the next 6 months, or are you looking to move in the next year? And you can see here when we break down back into our 2020 research and then look quarter by quarter going into the 2021 segments, there's all of a sudden a big jump at that period between April and August when most people were going back to work. You know, we came out of that second lockdown, that final lockdown, and then went back into, and employers were saying we need to come back into the workplace now. You know, we're now allowed to, so therefore please come back. And that period, you can see there, you can see a jump in the propensity to want to leave within the 6 months. The biggest jump you'll see there is the 8% jump and the 6 months, and then also 7% jump in the propensity to change in the next year. Real desire to change, so very much evident in our research. But was working to blame? Is this the reason why people are doing this? Is it because they don't want to go back to work? I don't think it's just about that. We look into our research and we also find some apprehension about working from home for so many people, for many, many reasons around career and choices. But it's a little bit more than that, we found. And one of the things we want to focus on is trust. really big part of employer brand and the way in which we look after our people and attract people is trust right now. And three questions we ask, or three open questions we ask, are: do you trust in your organization's vision? Do you trust in your organization's leaders? And do you feel as though you're trusted to do your job? And we ask them to answer this question in yes, I completely, yes, somewhat, neither here nor there, and a couple of no options. Now, what we see straight away here is yes, completely crowd are very much consistent through that period I was just alluding to, taking it into three segments: 2020, Q1 of last year, and then the subsequent period of our research after the lockdown periods. It's quite consistent, and this is your stronghold crowd. These are the old people who will back you through thick and thin as an organization, and that, typically you can see there, that's kind of like maybe 1 in 3 will stick with you through everything, and that's good to know. But then there's a tipping point, and the tipping point is the point where people say, yes, I somewhat trust in my organization's vision, I somewhat trust in my organization's leaders, I somewhat feel as though I'm trusted to do my job. That somewhat crowd are the ones that are saying yes, but they're wavering. There's a little bit of a waver, and what you'll see there is a gradual dip in the percentage of people who will say they somewhat trust in their organization, and it's dropping, and they're moving towards the no segments. And then when we look at the no segments, we see also that those are growing, as well, of course, the middle section around it. I'm indifferent to this. So what we're seeing is a slight element of trust loss, and this is important for employers to learn about what's important to people right now. It's maybe not that remote working has been taken away and people need to come back to the office more often. It's more about maybe the way in which it's done, the way in which we have communicated to our people, and whether we've maybe therefore lost a little bit of that trust. And to demonstrate this in a slightly another way, thanks to the people at McKinsey, who also did a piece of research last year. And on this scale here, you see along the bottom the things that employers find most important, in order of all of those things, which ones they consider to be most important to employees, the ones they consider to be probably less important. And then we look on the scale on the left-hand side and we see the equivalent for the employees. And what we see, that the things that are in the top left-hand corner are the big mismatches. They're the ones where employers don't think they're particularly important, or certainly regard them as less important than employees do. And what do we know about those things? Valued by manager, having caring and trusting teammates, a sense of belonging, and feeling valued by the organization. Straight away, value and trust are the missing links between employer and employee. So what is happening right now is employees need one thing, employers think they need something else, and employers are focused on their own needs of trying to make sure we get back to business as usual. It's a good message, it's a very true message, but of course the very, very important thing to consider is how are we communicating this to our employees, and therefore how are we also then communicating it outwardly to our potential talent out there in the network. So very, very interesting element we've found here underneath the cracks when it comes to why are people leaving, or why is there a change in behavior. So if we were trying to understand a little better what people need, and we need to try and build trust, then we need to understand talent better. And very crucially, we need to understand change in behavior. We need to understand what is different now to maybe it was even 2 years ago, 5 years ago, etc. Because the pandemic has changed the need of talent. It's changed our priorities as human beings and as families and as workers, and we've got to reflect on that. And one of the big things that we noticed this last research piece with the tech professionals, your particular area, is an interesting shift in the way in which they grade an employer, or the things they look for an employer. Look at 2020 versus 2021 and how embracing new technologies, number 2, innovation, number 4. Always those two, along with the salary, along with a friendly work environment, always important. Embracing new tech and innovation always are up there right at the top and have been for years. But in 2021, they dropped. They dropped in appreciation. They're still important. They are top 10. They're right up there as still a key consideration when choosing an employer. But what we're seeing is those things being replaced by much more elements around security, trust, and people. Clear path for advancement, career over the bells and whistles, and secure employment. No surprise in the pandemic environment now that secure employment is a growing element of appreciation. Employers are looking for security, needless to say, and respect for people. Look after me, trust me, I know what I'm doing, I want to work with good colleagues, good managers, good leaders, etc., etc. Those things are riding, those very human security elements, and the ones that are dropping are the technologies and innovation. Super fascinating. And if you look on the right hand side there, the biggest moves within our top 40 attributes that we use to benchmark employer brand success, the biggest moving elements are corporate social responsibility and commitment to diversity and inclusion. We are seeing a change in appreciation of what is important to a tech employee than it was even just 2 years ago pre the pandemic. So this is pretty seismic compared to normal, quite consistent trends year on year. This is pretty groundbreaking stuff that you need to be aware of. And looking at it in a slightly grouped together sense, you see at the top here, we've grouped together innovation, access to new technology, and creative work environment. 3 absolute hallmarks of tech employer brand and tech recruitment communications. Very much focused on the new bells and whistles, the fun environments, the casual, almost startup feel environment. Well, these things, as you can see, are dropping quite a consistent, and in fact, a slightly increased rate during the course of 2021. Really, they're not as important as they were before. But what we see on the other hand, of course, is inspiring purpose, social responsibility, and commitment to diversity and inclusion on the rise, and in some cases quite steep rise. And so we're starting to see a blending of the importance of the bells and whistles, the new technology and innovation, with a purpose-led environment, an environment that engenders trust and care and looks after people, the human-centric elements. And when we look at this from another perspective about from an employer branding perspective, and when people look at your careers pages and when they look at your social media pages, what do they expect you to talk about? What do they hope that you're going to speak the most about? You'll see there that at the top, there are a number of quite consistent elements, training development opportunities, advancement and career opportunities, benefits and products. At the top typically are, but what we're seeing also right up there, diversity inclusion is the number 5 elements that tech talent is expecting to read something about inside your organization, on your career site, in your social media pages, etc. And you see social responsibility moving highly there as well. And then let's look at that from the ones that have increased the most when we ask this question from 2020 to 2021. Social responsibility, big movement in progression this year. There's a real desire to work for an organization that has a bigger feeling, a larger heart, and as well as all the fun stuff around technology. And you see as well diversity inclusion on the rise as well, you'll see. So these are really important factors that we need to take into consideration in the balance of our communication. And balance and the reason I reference balance is because that's really what we've got to aim for. So I'm showing you over the next couple of pages some real best-in-class examples here. I mean, these are obviously the very big brands, but these, of course, are market leaders, and therefore what they also are is market leaders in attracting talents, and they're the ones that the wider tech market has to be able to battle against. And one of the things that they are leading the way with is generating a perfect balance between the need to still talk about innovation and technology, but to talk about it with purpose, in this case, sustainability, to make sure there are reference points in their career content, in their careers pages around the purpose behind what it is they're doing. What are the goals? What are the elements of social responsibility that the organization is undertaking in order to ensure that it is looking after the earth, it's looking after people, as well as innovating with consumer elements or whatever else it might be that it's supporting. So we see great examples there. And then just looking at the automation sector, and this is a transformational area, because if we look back just 4 or 5 years, maybe even 3 years actually, the automation sector, amongst all our research around the globe, the automotive sector was really taking a dip in appreciation, of course, as they were associated with dirty air and putting fumes into the atmosphere, and that meant automotive brands really took a hit over the years. But as these last few years have risen, there's a rebirth of a lot of these organizations into hybrid electric car, breathing fresh air, etc. Then the appreciation of these brands has risen again. And we saw it in the 2021 research in the UK that tech talent are really driven towards these particular brands like McLaren, Rolls-Royce, Jaguar, etc., as they're producing great technology, great innovation, but they're doing it in a way that takes us to a new generation of automotive and engine production into the world of cleaner air, and I think that's super appreciated. And here as well, the big factor that we saw in there was around diversity and inclusion, and again, big leaders here like Netflix, Google, really demonstrating the truths and the living diversity and inclusivity inside their organization, along with the innovation. And how very much talking around diversity of people, diversity of minds enhances innovation. It really builds that innovation and builds that different ways of thinking, and really using that really effectively in the communication to ensure that innovation and purpose are put together really logically and very naturally, and that's really well done. And one final one here is Spotify, who took real hold of mental health as a discussion point and a focus during November last year in Mental Health Awareness Week, and really looked at how they combine the way in which they look after people, the way in which they attract people, and a very clear message around how they support and encourage people to have open conversations, to have platforms for open conversation as well. And so innovation and purpose can go very much together, and that very much is a balance between the brain, the excitement of the innovation, and the people, the human element, the heart element of the things we need and appreciate as humans, as we've seen in the needs and desires of tech talent. These guys are really working this so well. So looking at an organization that we're just coming to the end of a journey with, so whilst I can't share with you the name of the organization because that would be wrong to do so right now, what I want to be able to do is sort of talk a little bit about the journey they're going on and trying to find its heart. So the organization is an organization of around 500 employees in the UK, fintech organization, very male focused, just inherently has become a very highly populated male environment. No particular reason, just the way in which it's been built over the years, and culture breeds culture, etc. Never had an EVP before, so it was the first time they came to us to say, hey, look, we want to pull together an employer value proposition. We want to be able to unite the organization and find the strengths of the organization, but also find the heart inside the organization, because we need to be more rounded in the way in which we attract talent. Growing at pace, it is a high growth organization going, particularly at the moment, looking at great growth stats. Focus has always been on outbound. It's driven around new talent development. Always look at hiring, always looking at hiring, less maybe focused on retention and looking after the people inside the organization. So a very bit of an exercise, a new exercise for the organization. The challenge we were faced with this one, a brand and how to attract talent, how to bring talent together. The company starts with a very low public identity. I'm sure many of you on this call recognize this and grapple with it. Particularly, there I was just 2 or 3 slides ago showing you all the Googles and Microsofts and Spotifys and Jaguars, and often it feels tough to compete against those organizations, but there are battles we can clearly win if we get our message right and to the right people. Attraction has been one-dimensional, very much driven around top universities around Europe, statisticians, very specific, very minute avenues and funnels of where they've been searching. So it's been quite one-dimensional to this point. Retention based on money. One thing is absolutely true about this organization: they pay well. So people stay because they know they're rewarded. The incentive schemes are fantastic. And there's something really strong about that in terms of retention, and difficult for other companies to grab them. The balance of, are they a tech firm or a finance firm? Those of you who are in a fintech call on this, fintech company on this call will probably recognise this challenge as this company is also a company that matches as a blend of tech people with a blend of finance people. So real interesting mix. And the normal, and just to kind of add a little bit of a cream onto the top of the cake with regard to the challenge facing the organisation through this process, is this was an organisation who said, we don't want, well, now you can come back to work. We want you to be in the office. They wanted no work from home. They wanted people to be in the office and be working from their offices. And that, of course, naturally created a little bit of friction with certain corners of the organization that they needed to kind of look at how they are communicating this and bringing people together through this. And the action points, we needed to understand the needs of the target talent. So we needed to look externally at what it is that their talent that they attract is caring about right now. Just like I alluded to earlier, looking at those changes and what's important to their target talent. Then we need to do an internal survey using the same metrics we use internally from a benchmarking perspective to try and get an idea of what it's like to work there, what is their strengths, why would they suggest that people come and work for them, and also where are the challenges inside the organization. Then we look at leadership vision, management interviews, understand where they're going and what they're trying to achieve and what they want to be seen as. And the real goal is, can we find the human heart inside what is a very structured, quite hard, very male-led and very finance-led organization that has a lot of those points that we referenced earlier: innovation, good environment, and development of technology right there, right at the forefront of every part of their organization. But what was not evident is those things that are maybe coming up through the in the appreciation trail. So this is what we did from a research perspective. Always very good, wherever possible, if you can, try and do some research or use research when you're starting to build your employer branding strategy. Guesswork can be quite clumsy, it can be quite messy, and therefore I would always encourage you to try and reference external data points. Universum's packed full of them, but obviously also, and as we did with this company, we'll go and do specific pieces of research for organizations as well. And you can see here the two elements that we had to undertake manually were the management interviews, which we spoke to 7 leaders at the organization. We then the internal survey captured 188 respondents and their thoughts and voices around what it's like to work there. So we really understand who they are. And then at the bottom, of course, we used our Universum external research into tech and STEM students from across those select universities that they prefer to attract talent from to do the kind of work that they want to achieve. We've got to feel as though, what is it that they are looking for? And as those diagrammatic pieces on the left-hand side kind of imply, each one of those circles, each of those 3 groupings gets a collection of voices, a collection of tone of voice, a collection of feelings driven and measured by Universum's 40 drivers of talent attraction. And we look to see where they overlap, those parts in the middle, to say what matches the vision, the truth, and the needs of talent. And when we overlap those 3 areas, then we find our sweet spot in the middle. And that's what we did with this organization. And there were 3 corners of opinion that came from it. The management, you can see here, about talking about the brightest academic minds. We nurture great talent. We tackle some of the biggest challenges. We use advanced technology. We have a dynamic culture. All those things we were referring to that are very, very important, but a little bit on the dip. We incentivize, etc. But then all of a sudden, we get family comes first. Now, that was really fascinating. We weren't expecting that. When you see those previous phrases, you don't see family comes first with that. There are elements there about being surrounded by good people. That's a good positive sign as well. And learning always a privileged place where they're consistently learning. And that's exciting as well. But needless to say, whilst many of those things were almost what we expected from the organization, the family comes first thing really stood out. So then when we marry that against the employees' responses, again, we see the salary bit comes well, the growth entrepreneurial element, the innovation, high performance, but then we work 9 to 5, period. Super interesting. Appreciation of personal and family is valued. Then we go back to people earn good money, we're predicting the future, innovating, blah, blah. I really value and trust my colleagues, a really lovely tone there as well. But once again, we found some of the human element that exists in here. We work 9 to 5 here. And sure enough, when you explore this in our workshops that we did with the organisers afterwards, once we took all the research together and we went into the workshop groups, we identified that actually, yes, they do ask them to come into the office, but they say, we don't want to see you here after 5:30 in the evening. You need to be gone. You need to go home and you need to be with your family or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, and respect family time. And when you come here, be the best you can be, do the best you can do, work with these great colleagues. We'll reward you. We'll reward you for that innovation, the success, etc. But when it's done, when the time is the right time, get on the train or get in the car and go home and go and see your family. And that respect for the desire to innovate and work hard in the daytime with great people, but also to respect and care about the family and ask about the family and show an interest in the family was really fascinating, a really great kind of hybrid to pull together as to who this organization really was. And then and I mean, that's obviously we also then have to try and brace some of all of these things with the external market. And one of the work bits that we do when we go through that process, remember, as I said, with the 3 loops, the idea is to find associating words and lines so we can start to really target our communications. And so much of it, of course, is balancing the mix between the people element, the way in which people are looked after, etc., but also the innovation. As I mentioned earlier, marrying the heart and the brain is super important in the way in which we look for the right tone of voice to go out to market. And as the banner on the right hand side says, very much a Universum banner there, marrying the brain and the heart. It's very much the heart of the work that we do. And therefore the 4 tone of voice pillars that we discussed and agreed were around, yes, the courage and the innovation at the top, but also the humanization. And whilst obviously these aren't the EVP pillars, this is just me giving a bit of a sense of tone of our shared subjects, our common themes that come across the business. What we see is we get the innovation at the top and the courage that absolutely attracts certain people because they really are given the freedom to innovate. But then we get the humanization of the organization was really important to get across through this. And the way in which people share success together. It's a very people collegiate environment rather than a collaborative environment, rather than one of, the kind of the tone that seemed to come out that it's about me and my money and my career and what I can achieve, etc. Well, actually, all the tone of the internal message was around how we lean on great people. We have great colleagues. We have great successes together. We do it together because of great minds, great diverse minds, and great different ways of thinking. And that approach is something that they want to build on in order to attract a wider set of talent, a more broader group of people into the organization, so they can blend that humanization element much more with all the courage and innovation that comes naturally through the organization. So we're coming to the end of that project. It's very exciting. It's lovely to see so many good things come together when we spend this time with an organization like we did with this one. So to summarize before I finish, key things to think about as we walk away from this. Assumptions are futile. Understand the needs of talents now. As I mentioned earlier, guesswork is no good anymore. The world moves too fast. People are changing too quickly, and therefore we need to be astute as to what people need right now. Don't make assumptions from what happened 5 years ago. The tech talent audience is maturing. I think that's a good way to reference this. I think what we're realizing now is this is an industry that is less around maybe some of the characteristics of 5 years ago, which was focused very much on 20-somethings and social culture, etc. But actually, whereas now a lot of those people have moved on and they're into their 30s and 40s and have got kids and family, and the needs and drivers have become different. But so is the pandemic. The pandemic has made us all stop back and think and stop and move us away from just worrying about portfolio lifestyles and bells and whistles, but much more into security and needs. We need to marry brain versus the heart, read innovation and purpose. marry those two things together when we're thinking about how we attract talent. Work with your tech teams on understanding needs and desires. And, as I say, I mentioned research pieces that are back there. Research can sometimes be quite expensive, and if you're for a smaller organization, it might not be as feasible. So use the people inside your organization to try and understand what they need, what they care about right now. Feel free to come and talk to us about the drivers that we use and how we measure that against external talent. And then creating trust inside the organization fuels really good employer branding success. If we just get if we communicate more openly, more transparently, with greater care, understand anxiety, embrace different feelings and thoughts, particularly, remember the Spotify thing about mental health, and right at the forefront of everybody's thought process at the moment in this very confusing hybrid world that we're sort of living in. It fuels employer branding success. It creates real, true stories and creates advocacy inside your organization. So consider trust. Are you fostering trust inside your organization? Do your tech talent trust you? And do they feel as though they're trusted to do their work? So thanks very much for letting me sort of run through some of that with you. Hopefully that was really interesting stuff. You feel very welcome to contact me if you want to kind of explore this sort of world slightly more. There's some subject matters that we're very much involved in on the left-hand side. Happy to answer any questions around anything that I've discussed today. Thanks for your time. I'm going to hand you over to Dom from CWJobs now, and he'll have a chat with the guest panel for today. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, Steve. Really interesting. As mentioned before, I'm delighted to be joined by Nimmi Patel and Milimo Banji. I gave them a very light introduction at the beginning of it, but Nimmi, do you want to kick things off with talking about yourself for a little bit, introducing yourself?
Sure, thanks so much, Dom. As you mentioned, I'm Nimmi Patel. I'm the Policy Manager for Skills, Talent and Diversity, and I work for a tech trade association called techUK, which CWJobs is a part of. We have over 830 members, and they all operate across different aspects of society.
Thank you, Nimmi. Mills?
Perfecto, and thank you so much. I'm Milimo Banji. I'm the founder and CEO of a media company called TapIn. Essentially, we are a media company that's first and foremost with a mission to prepare, 100 million young people for the world of work. So a lot of our work pertains to, producing content that supports young people to get into the world of work. But we also operate as an agency, so supporting employers in how they attract and engage with diverse talent across the field.
Fantastic. So some real different breadth of perspectives there. Great. So looking at the video, what are your thoughts on what Steve presented? Anything really jump out to you?
I thought the insight on creating trust inside an organization and the fact that it fuels external employer brand success is particularly interesting. I think those kinds of EVPs really need to include clear values, behaviors and promises, essentially sort of what an organization stands for, requires and offers as an employer. We know how important it is to create values inside an organization, but I think what Steve definitely demonstrated is that we need to be better at communicating them.
Yeah, externally, so the potential workforce that's coming to apply for, that's a really important point. Nimmi. Mills, anything resonate particularly with yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was really cool insights there from Dom. And I think, one thing that really stood out for me was, when you look at the data that came out around the reasons why people were leaving, they cited that lack of belonging. They cited that lack of belonging as one of the cool reasons, and the fact that people didn't feel valued. So to me, it speaks to the need for tech employers to really, invest more in how do you make your employees feel more valued. Interestingly enough, actually, when you look at things like CSR, D&I, and purpose, they increased or up by between 6 to 10 points. So people really care about, things like CSR and diversity and inclusion. And off the back of COP26 last year, we can see that correlation in data coming in. So it was really interesting for me to see that, CSR, diversity and inclusion, and that purpose factor were really important for tech talent.
Yeah, a couple of things leapt out at me in terms of how things changed last year. When it was all locked down and everybody saying, doesn't matter, we're looking after you, you can work from home. Then when the commercial realities came back, kind of July, August, and it was like, well, people need to start coming back. That's when the kind of distrust seemed to creep in, wasn't it? But back to your point, Mills, in terms of CSR, diversity, equality, inclusion. At first, I came off it and I thought, maybe we've just all gone crackers sat in our four walls for 2 years. But actually, if you look at the data, the trend starts in 2019. So this is, and I think Gen Z certainly have a lot to play in this and really bringing this to the fore. And I suppose the pandemic really has just accelerated that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Nimmi, do you see those trends? Does that kind of marry up to what your conversations with other industry bodies, actual companies? Does it marry with that, or do you think that there's a blind spot in the industry for not really understanding EVP effectively enough?
Yeah, we're seeing similar trends in the industry. I think right now it's tough, right? I've heard from large tech businesses who are techUK members who have really strong global brands finding it difficult to source the talent that they need. And I think it's due to a number of reasons, one of which is including the lack of digital skills in the market, an intensification of competition for the same sort of talent. But what's key is what Stephen Mills mentioned, the fact that belonging is such a core component of people trying or not accepting employer brands as well as they used to. And this is really shown in the Deloitte Global Millennial Survey, which came out a few weeks ago, which showed that over the past 2 years, 44% of millennials and 49% of Gen Zs have said they made choices over the type of work they are prepared to do and the organizations for which they're willing to work based on their personal ethics. And about 15% of those surveyed said that they either left their jobs or started new careers after reflecting on the pandemic and their values. So I think, with top tech talent being some of the most sought after global skills, tech businesses really need to be at the forefront of supporting and nurturing the values this kind of talent has, or at least this generation in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in fact, I would add to that and say, actually, if you look at tech talent right now, it's they're amongst the most sought after of employees or workers in the entire world. If you look 5, 6 years ago, people like investment bankers, young people who were looking to get into investment banking and spend your, 20 or was it 80 hours, 80 to 100 hours in a week. That sounds absurd now. We've got tech jobs here where people will do a normal 9 to 5 and they'll be on really, really, really good salaries. And I think people have realized that actually when you do move into tech, you've got a perfect juxtaposition there. You've got really good work-life balance and really good pay. So we're seeing an influx of talent moving into tech, and it's becoming a lot more challenging for employers to actually engage with that tech talent. But 5 years ago, if you told me that in 4 or 5 years I'd be getting the same amount as an investment banker for doing less hours, I would have laughed at you.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. And your point to the 80 to 100 hours, working 80 to 100 hours a week, we work very hard, maybe not 80 to 100 hours, but I think what the pandemic did was created some kind of breathing space into actually, what do I want to do?
Right.
And I don't have to do this because I might be on furlough, because I might have a couple of extra hours not commuting. And I think that's why we've seen this diversion from, listen, I've just got to go to work every day and do that stuff. So that's why I think so many of the ethical things have come to the fore. And then you start to look at the whole trust piece, don't you? So
it is a bit of a shame that it took a global pandemic for us to come to this realization. Yeah. It's a trend that I think industries, across sectors had been seeing for some time, but there wasn't a willingness or a monetary value to say, or a lack of even talent to say, let's go forward with this, let's push for progress. I think now companies have understood that this kind of flexibilities and the values that people have really undermine their bottom line. Yeah.
Do you actually think that remote working, I mean, I have a fear, I suppose, that in 2-3 years we'll look around and everything will be back to normal. And God, we've missed this opportunity to potentially change. Do you have the same fears? What and if you don't, what encourages you that this is the new norm? Mills? Any?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that is where I was just kind of seeing there. No, it's really interesting to see how that has completely shifted. I know, I can speak for a lot of organizations that we work with. They've actually found really, really cool, interesting ways to adapt their ways of working to be more digital, to really involve things like working from home. Because the thing is, if talent needs and wants change, companies also need to kind of change. You need to kind of shift with how talent is willing to work. And if working from home is the norm, then that tends to be the shift that companies then follow. If your talent or the talent that you're after is opting to work from home, then that's a natural shift for organizations to make. It's really interesting that in the UK, I think I read a couple of days ago that they're trialing a 4-day working week to see the effectiveness of that. It'll be really interesting to see what the outtakes of that are once the study is done. I think a few organizations can opt in. I know a few tech companies have already opted into that as well, but it'll be interesting to see what the data says off the back of that. But again, it's another shift that's saying, in the long term, can organizations adopt a 4-day working week as a function of improving productivity and increasing efficiency? But it'll be interesting to see how that comes up in a couple of months.
Yeah, the changing nature of work and the changing nature of people and our values really means that there's more that companies can and should do to support people. I think what's really important is the kind of upfront flexibilities that remote working and flexible working offers, which means that you could potentially get more applications for roles from minority groups or persons with disabilities. And I guess you're thereby accessing different pools of talent, which is obviously so crucial in the tech industry where we're facing a huge skills gap and skills challenges. Also kind of the balance between employees' personal lives with personal commitments means that companies can improve the retention of their staff. Organizations would be more willing to want to help their employees and have a level of care that is a little bit different. And I know that this is not as well accepted in the tech sector as other industries, for instance, but it's a growing concept, and that's what we have to be mindful of.
Absolutely. And actually, off the back of that, I'd add that, with these different challenges that tech companies are facing to attract remote talent, you have to think about how they're actually reaching this talent. What strategies are tech companies now implementing to actually reach this digitally remote talent that's based across the whole country? Companies based in London, but actually, people have moved out of London. Because of COVID, people have moved out of London. The cost of living, as we all know, in London is stupendously expensive. People have left London, they've moved to nearby areas. People have come up to Manchester, which is where I am, Birmingham, places in the north. Those are key pools of talent who have left the southeast and have actually moved across to position themselves across the whole different country. But what's interesting now is, how do tech companies begin to readapt themselves? How do they use employer branding? How do they use or utilize, social media and social or different platforms and channels to actually engage with this talent in a different way than they used to in the previous years?
Yeah, that's a fascinating point, Mills, because if you talk about a remote workforce, your identity is no longer in the building you are in, or how cool the building you're in so much, but the actual people and the values you have, and this kind of diaspora that's spread across the country in terms of people moving to Manchester, Bristol, and reinforcing those, and Scotland and Edinburgh. Let's not forget Edinburgh and Glasgow. Reinforcing those as hubs of IT and really skilled, technically experienced talent pools. Just spoken about remote working. Nimmi, what do you think will be potentially further effects of a remote working down the line?
There's been research done by Vodafone which shows the cost of not putting in remote, flexible and parental leave. More than a third of people and more than half of 18 to 34-year-olds would be more likely to apply for a job if they knew the employer had good parental leave policies. Employers who do not offer sufficient parental leave really risk losing top tech talent. Top tech talent. The report findings, they really look at the fact that people value employers offering enhanced parental leave policies and the positive impact this could have on attracting and retaining young talent.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually off the back of that profile of talent has changed, right? Well, if you're based in London, you fit a very unique profile, but actually the moment you go remote, it's very different. You're on your phone more, perhaps you're not commuting, so
Yeah.
really interesting just to kind of analyze and really understand how, organizations will adapt their strategies to attract this talent.
How have you seen them do that? So, and you must have seen that change over 3-4 year period. So what would be your advice in terms of representing your employer brand when a poster campaign on the tube is no longer necessarily going to actually hit your key audience? What would you recommend?
Absolutely. I think, if footfall has dropped on the tube, for example, and people are, just tuning in, rolling out of bed and onto Zoom calls, I guess how you engage with them also changes. I guess for me, the most important thing first is, my definition of what essentially an employer brand is. Why does it matter? What is employer branding to me? And, the way I would define employer branding is, an organization's ability to clearly convey who they are, what they stand for. And for me, there are a few key ingredients that make that. The first one is how authentic are you? How authentic are you as an organization? And being able to share what you stand for. It's a massive thing, particularly when we look at Generation Z. We care about things like, purpose and authenticity. So, an employer brand has to exemplify and be what an employer really stands for and be a true reflection of what the organization actually does. So it's really important for me when I define the meaning of employer brand to understand the importance of something like authenticity. So, if you're an employer, you're a tech employer and you're looking to engage with tech talent, irrespective of where they are, irrespective of medium, the first and foremost thing to really consider is actually how do we convey what we're doing in the most authentic way? Right? How do we convey our values, our people, our ethics, our awards? And actually, off the back of that, it's then thinking about how you communicate that piece. Once you've identified that you're authentic and you've picked out all the core authentic pieces of your employer brand, then it's thinking, how do you communicate that message? As you mentioned earlier, people aren't taking the tube anymore. So the effectiveness of tube ads perhaps aren't going to be as engaging. So you'd look to things like social media, particularly if you're looking to engage with talent in the early career space, or in fact, actually, this spans across millennials and different generations. So, you look at platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat, where we know that 45% of Gen Z are spending time on a platform like TikTok. They spend, 20% of them spend more than 5 hours on a platform like TikTok. So if you're looking to engage with them, and particularly that demographic, think about the platforms that they're in. How are you communicating that brand to them? You can get it right, and it can be really clear cut, but actually, really, really important piece is how do you then communicate that employer brand directly to the audience? And knowing what platforms and channels they're on sits as paramount, actually. And I would say just one more thing as well is, and it's something that we see time and time again, employers are missing this, which is you can be authentic, you can shout about yourself and talk about how great you are as a tech employer and what you've done and the awards, but actually think about the utility to the candidate or the audience or your community. What value are they getting from your social channel or from your website or from your LinkedIn page or from your Twitter? What value do they get? Apart from just, we have won these awards and we do this. What can you, as a tech employer, give back to them? What kind of value can you be sharing to them? Can you be giving them tips on how to ace technical interviews? Could you be sharing tips on, how to prepare for interviews in the first place? So, if I'm a tech employer right now, I'm thinking about my employer brand, I'm thinking about how to develop it. One of the key things I'll definitely be thinking about is that education piece. What value can we be giving back to candidates and keep them coming back? So I'll definitely say that about employer brand and a tech organization's ability to attract talent.
100%. And I think that point you made, Mills, about authenticity is really important. We see how businesses sometimes often try to manufacture authenticity and it just doesn't work. So for instance, during 2020, we were going through the beginnings of this crisis, but we were also going through a kind of injustice crisis with the Black Lives Matter movement. And a lot of UK tech businesses and obviously global tech businesses put out Black Lives Matter statements. But what was really important for the people watching this and their target audiences and you know the people they were looking to target is not just the messaging of what they were doing, the action behind it. You know, have they supported Black communities to do more? Have they looked at kind of intersectional representation? Have they pushed for sort of more I guess equitable outcomes?
Right.
And that was really important. And we're, you know, at the time it wasn't something everyone was talking about, but now 2 years later it's really apparent that a statement on Black Lives Matter isn't enough. It's all about the action that companies were taking after that. And I think that really goes to Mills's point about giving back.
And absolutely, it makes absolute sense, actually. You know, if you're an organization at the time, and we saw it time and time again, a multitude of organizations who the public or we knew or people knew when actively invested in supporting Black lives or supporting Black talent in their own organization, they were putting up banners, they were putting squares on their Instagram profiles, which didn't really mean too much, you know. And it's only once we analyze that off the back of Black talent, off the back of the Black Lives Matter movement, that actually now we're analyzing organizations and thinking, actually, who's really putting in that effort? You know, who's really putting their money where their mouth's at? You know, when it comes to attracting Black talent, who's actually doing that work? You know, and it's so important to actually have that authenticity and to line up your values to what you actually do.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you were talking about those awards, actually, Mills, one of my favourite quotes or favourite thoughts, I suppose, is data without stories or insights is just numbers.
Yeah.
And awards without any stories or meaning or insights behind them presented. Look, we've won the award. It's just trinkets. It doesn't. Right. So the award has to be turned into something, and this is the reason why it's important. And you know, really express to the audience or community you want to present that out to. Again, in an authentic manner of why it is important and what went into that. And the second point, believe it or not, I'm not part of Gen Z, so I can speak for the older generations, not even millennial, unfortunately, but the slightly sniffy attitude that I think people of my generation and older can have of, say, a new kid on the block, like, or relatively new, right, TikTok or something like that, or Snapchat, and that, in their opinion, it's a little bit throwaway. But you're missing the point. You're not speaking to the audience you want to attract in the way they want it to be. They want to be contacted and spoken to. And I think I love the characteristic of humility. And I think that a lot of decision makers need that humility to reach out to people that know more about them, about, you know, these newer avenues, and really use that humility to learn and actually maximize the audience they can then speak to. So some nice points there. So I suppose once employers go down the avenue of trying to improve in this area, how do you think they can measure their success? Actual feet on the ground, or is it a change in perception? How do you think it's best done by employers to know that they're moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you are looking to communicate your employer brand on a social channel, for example, you know, a lot of times you're not going to get results immediately. You know, so if you're a tech employer watching this right now and you're thinking, hey, we're just going to go, you know, create our own Instagram page and they will come, we shall build it and they will come, you know, it doesn't quite work out like that, unfortunately. Essentially, what happens is it needs to be a sustained investment in you building community. And I'm talking about social media here, right? I'm talking about if you're looking to engage on a platform like TikTok or Instagram or Reddit, in fact, or Twitter, and you're looking to find those platforms where tech talent actually is. If they're social channels, you have to first, you know, invest in building a community, and community come and grow based on trust and authenticity, points that we've already covered. So if you're able to build a platform or community that is premised on trust and authenticity, and you have a sustained effort or a sustained investment from the business to build these channels, results don't tend to actually appear probably until 6 months in, 6 to 12 months in, sometimes even longer. And the reason that's the case is you have to first invest in your community, invest in building. I hate using the word pipeline or candidates, because I'm much rather community, because if you're building a community, you're not seeing them as these are going to be our future candidates. Actually, you're just investing in them. They love coming to you. They love sharing your content. They love listening to all the cool things that you're sharing about. They love, all the advice you're giving. They love all the awards, your journey, the people, the fact they're loving all of that. And that works to build community. In terms of measuring success, particularly on social media, that tends to take some time, 6 months, 12 months, possibly more after that. But you can measure things like, there are things on TikTok where you can run ads, perhaps, you can run ads and measure the click-throughs directly to a site. On Instagram, the number of followers tends to sit almost as a vanity metric, but actually, if you're seeing a sustained increase in followers and it's organic, those are your, that's your real community, and that's what you should be aiming for. So off the back of that, you might decide, 6 months in, hey, let's add a job here. You've built that trust and authenticity in your community. 6 months in, hey, we've got a job opening. What you find is that community that you've built, jump on that opportunity, and they're already there. You've already built that community of talent who are waiting to actually jump out for the opportunity. So if you're thinking about social media, measurables and deliverables aren't always immediate.
So real patience required. It's
Absolutely.
not going to be an instant overnight success, but neither are you building, something which needs to be knocked down and takes a lot of time to knock. You can steer it as you're driving it, can't you? So some great advice in there, and I think again goes back to authenticity and not tokenism of let's jump on the social media bandwagon. In 3 months hasn't worked, let's jump off of it. Have a year, 18 months, 2-year plan.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we see tech employers making. They hear advice like this, and the first thing they do is say, right, well, who's our marketing or who's our recruitment lead or talent acquisition? Let's go create a social media channel. Actually take a step back, and the process tends to first start with data. Collect some data to understand your core audience. What's their makeup? Where do they spend most of their time? After you collected that data, then build a strategy that will cover you over the period of 6 or 12 months or however long you plan to build that channel. So don't just rush in now and jump in. Hey, Mark, let's have a meeting and let's launch a channel. Actually take a step back, collect some data. Everything we do and everything we always recommend has got to be data driven and pursued from a point of real understanding of the audience.
And a longer term vision rather than just a short term cash in, as it were, or even a medium term chasing followers.
That's right.
Some excellent advice there. Nimmi, as far as the wider UK IT industry, what would you advise? Are there common mistakes being made, or are there some real success stories that can be mirrored by other companies?
100%. So, we talk all about the fact that data can cut through your assumptions, and essentially once you've got that data, you can build a strategy. And we really think that effective and sustainable solutions must cover every aspect of a company. So things like the people, the process, its culture, for instance. And this includes sort of things around action in the community. So what can you do to inspire the next generation? And there's so much stuff out there. It's all about latching on to something that you think would benefit your target audiences. You've done the research, but also mirrors your values. So things like outreach programs at local schools, or business in the community activities, or offering work experience placements, apprenticeships, T-levels. For us at techUK, on an operational level, we work with an organisation called Generating Genius, who work with students from BAME backgrounds to offer them a work experience placement, because we want to know how tough work experience can be, just to propel them in their STEM careers. There's also loads of things that can be done around attraction and recruitment. So how can we fish in diverse ponds? So things around, wording of job adverts, recruiting with support from talent agencies and job boards, all things that organizations know about, but don't realize that it has to be done collectively in order to actually make an impact on the employer brand. obviously we've spoken at length about kind of retention and getting workplace culture right, but this sort of includes training for staff, you know, ensuring that staff have safe spaces, ensuring equity of performance management. I mean, that's a really big one for us, you know, making sure that pay and pay related performance compensation and people analytics is all a part of making sure an employer brand is great. You know, you always hear about companies and tech businesses who say they're a great place to work. So why are they a great place to work? Do they offer lunch? Do they, you know, what is it? Do they have a pool table, for instance? What are the core components that make that company recognizable as a good place to work? And then obviously the last one is all around development, growing that talent. How can companies actionably retain their staff by offering mentoring and sponsorship schemes, reverse mentoring? So there's so much that I've spoken about, but it all leads to a positive impact on employer brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd add to that actually, Nimmi, that just to pick on one of the points that you brought up there on things like salaries. We're seeing this particularly in our space with Gen Z and young people, but they're demanding for organizations, and I think this is something that we're seeing across the tech space, right? They're demanding, candidates and talent are demanding for salaries to be conveyed on job ads. They want to see how much they're going to be getting paid. You know, it's a massive thing. You know, we've seen that there's 20% increase across, you know, the industry in the number of jobs that have actually been posted. But actually we're seeing this and we're hearing this from our audiences that actually, you know, young people and, you know, people within tech genuinely actually want to see some of these salaries and these prices. And then the other thing is actually the feedback, you know, feedback off the back of these interviews. Once you've done an interview with a tech company, a lot of people are being ghosted. Right? They're being ghosted, which means employers aren't following up and giving them feedback based on their, you know, a test. And I was looking at a meme just yesterday, actually, coincidentally, and it was like the tech interview is harder than the tech job itself. So imagine going through a very difficult tech interview, preparing possibly for weeks for it, to not be given feedback on your role. You know, so it's a massive thing off the back of what you said just there, Nimmi.
And Mills, how many times is that person ever going to apply for a role in that company again, or even potentially buy their products?
Absolutely.
It is such a costly mistake, and you are talking such high value candidates. You should be nurturing them for potentially an application in 2 or 3 years, unless there's something badly wrong, in which case they need to be told maybe they're in the wrong scope. So that some really great points. But Mills, what are the newest, most exciting things you see on the horizon for attracting talent?
That's a really interesting question, actually. And I think the hottest thing right now is NFTs. Everyone's talking about NFTs, right? Everyone's talking about these NFTs. And interestingly enough, you know, NFTs, DAO, tokenization. Cool friend of mine recently, he's a few years younger than me. I'm 25, he's like 23. He's tokenized himself, right? So what that means is he's turned his life into a digital asset. You know, and that's really interesting because now in the space of about a week, he's raised about £34,000, which is the equivalent to, I think it's about 14 ETH, which is crazy. So he's tokenized himself, tokenized his life, and people can bid on different things. You know, you pay about £1,000 technically for half an hour meeting with him every 2 weeks. And it's this really cool way that we're seeing Gen Z, particularly over the last 3 or 4 months, investing a lot of their time into things like NFTs and DAOs and, you know, tokenizations. And there's this whole thing about the metaverse. You know, I read a report by, I think it was Gartner 2 days ago, which said that 25% of people are going to be spending at least 1 hour in the metaverse by 2026. That's absolutely incredible. It's such an interesting statistic. And when you're looking at your employer brand and you're looking at how you're engaging with talent, I spoke about the importance of education earlier. Actually, if you're not doing anything in the metaverse, if you're not doing anything with NFTs, then, you know, produce content that educates people on metaverse. Produce content, you know, on your social channels that's talking about, you know, tokenizations or DAOs or, you know, these new and emerging technologies. And if you are actually actively building these technologies, we want to hear about them. Gen Z want to hear about the metaverse. They want to hear about NFTs. If you look at a platform like OpenSea, last year, I think they traded something like 20 billion pounds worth of transaction. But in the first 2 weeks of January alone, over 10 billion has already been traded. So we can see that there's going to be a massive trend in emerging technologies, and it's a good thing for most employers, particularly tech employers, to be shouting about and talking about.
I just want to thank you, Nimmi, and Mills for making it really interesting for me. Hopefully the audience will take that and plenty of advice out of it. We know that the tech industry can offer fantastic careers for increasingly diverse audience in terms of background, in terms of if they're parents or not, in terms of working remotely. That work-life balance, it really comes out strong from this industry, and long may it last. Some fantastic advice in there. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. My name's Dominic Harvey, dominic.harvey@cwjobs.co.uk if you want to get in touch with me. Mills is very much available online, and Nimmi's contactable at techUK, but if you want their email addresses, then please contact me and I'll gladly pass them on if you can't find them on, but I'm sure you will be able to. So thank you once again. I hope it's been useful, and I will speak to you soon.
Thanks very much, Dom.
Thank you so much, Dom.
CW Jobs, the home for tech jobs.